Troglodytes, troglodytes, oh how you delight us, you beautiful little brown job. I hear your loud song as you flit along the hedgerows, tail all cocked. You may be small, it doesn't matter at all, for your energy knows no bounds. But as I wonder, I do have to ponder, are you the greatest bird of all? Hello and welcome to this next episode of Mattanory. I can't remember how many I've done now, but it doesn't really matter. It's a lovely spring morning in my garden here today. Before I go with the story, there's a couple of birthdays. My mum, who probably won't see this, it's her birthday today. Donna Williams as well, it's her birthday today as well. And tomorrow it's my lovely wife Helen's birthday, who's going to be 25, I think, something like that. Maybe with a bit of VAT. So giggling in the background. I can't guarantee that my cat who's next to me, who's probably out of shot, won't interfere with this at some point. So hopefully I can sort of carry on with this one. This is called the King and Queen of the Birds. One day, all the birds of England, and therefore the world, were gathered together in the woods. They were discussing who is the prettiest, the handsomest, the strongest, the bravest, the wisest. And they kept arguing about it all day. After some time, the wise owl shouted for silence and suggested that rather than bickering and arguing that wasn't going to get them anywhere, they should have a competition, and whoever won it would be crowned the king and the queen of all the birds. The birds agreed. It was quite a good idea. And once again they started arguing about what type of competition it should be. I mean, each bird kind of suggested something that would favour their own special skills and talents, of course. And they just kept on arguing and arguing until a loud, strong voice came from the back and boomed out, "We should have a competition to see who can fly the highest." It was one of a pair of eagles who had spoken. All the other birds shook and shivered in fright because they were quite big, the eagles, and nobody really wanted to argue with them. So they agreed that that would be the competition. So they decided to meet the next day to hold the flying contest. The birds gathered the following morning at dawn. They had it all eaten, a nice filling breakfast, to give them energy, obviously, for the competition. The sparrows had plenty of grass seeds and pecked on them. Robins had gorged themselves on tasty caterpillars. And the buzzards, well, they filled up on plump voles, of course. As each bird arrived, they sang their song and stretched their wings and fluffed up their feathers, warming up ready for the competition. The doves and the pigeons were up in the trees, and they decided to be the starters. So they shouted out, "On your marks, get set, go! On your marks, get set, go! On your marks, get set, go!" You see, doves and pigeons often say things 3 times for some reason, at least 3 times anyway. A wave of rushing wind swept the woodland, and each bird beat its wings and took flight. The contest to see who could fly the highest had begun. Birds flew into the sky until they got as far and as high as their wings could carry them. The littlest of birds could only really reach the tops of the trees, and then they had to give up and return to the ground because their small wings were far too exhausted for them. Bigger birds, well, they could fly a bit higher, maybe into the clouds, before becoming tired too and succumbing to the same fate and having to return safely to the ground. But there were 2 birds that soared further away than any of the others. It was those eagles. They glided on the thermals of air, circling above the other birds. They flew so high that the air that was so thin that breathing was difficult. For when you get above the atmosphere above the earth, it is quite difficult to breathe. These great birds looked down on the others who were giving up one by one. They shouted out triumphantly, "We have won! We have gone higher than any other bird." "Not so fast," peeped a little voice. With a fluttering of tiny wings, 2 little brown birds flew out of their hiding place amongst the feathers of the eagle's back. The 2 birds hovered just a few inches above the eagles and squeaked, "Look! Look who has flown the highest now! We are the winners!" The eagles turned their heads, staring in disbelief at this tiny stowaways who barely managed to keep a light above them. It was the Jenny Wrens. The eagles were furious being outsmarted by such an insignificant little brown bird. They screeched angrily and swooped away towards the earth. The little wrens chirped in delight until they thought about what a long way down it is. The eagles just fluffed their feathers and just flew down away from them, so the little Jenny Wrens had to begin their descent. The wind was racing through their wings, and they fell faster and faster until thump! Thump! The poor creatures hit the ground so hard that their tail feathers were pushed up towards their rumps. And still to this day, the wren's tail points straight up to the sky. I've got a little wren here, and if you do see one in the woodland, you'll notice this. But all the other birds waiting below cheered for the wrens. They had, of course, won the competition through their wit and cleverness, not through size or strength. And so it was the clever tiny wren that were crowned king and queen of all the birds. So I think this little wren needs a little crown above her head.